Okay, Grandpa, tell me about the story of the food drop, I guess?
At that time, the Allied forces had overrun and taken back most of Holland. But along the coast, there still were German contingents that hadn't surrendered yet. The Dutch people were starving at that time. Their supplies, which had been essentially supplied by the Germans, had been cut off by our forces in order to force the Germans to surrender. And unfortunately, they caught the Dutch civilian population just as hard, and they were starving. So the word that we got as crews was that General Doolittle had issued what amounted to an ultimatum to the Germans. We're going to load our B-17s and B-24s with food, and we're going to drop them to the Dutch civilians. Our bombers will be unarmed, and they will not be escorted by any fighters. We're depending on you as humane people not to try to shoot any of our bombers down, because it's a mercy mission. On the other hand, if you do choose to shoot any bombers down, then of course we will retaliate. And with that background, it was decided to use quite a number of B-17s and B-24s. And the way it was done, plywood bomb bay doors were manufactured and installed in the bomb bays of both types of aircraft, so that when you open the normal bomb bays doors, as if you were to drop bombs, the plywood doors would open at the same time, and you could drop food to the Dutch. And I happened to be alerted for one of those missions. We took off. Well, our briefing was for, I think there were 3 or 4 squadrons that day. And the high squadron, I think, was to assemble at 1,600 feet, 1,200, 800, and 400. And I was in the 400. And we took off and couldn't see a thing. Took off in dense fog. And we, of course, homed on our splasher beacon. And we began to climb. And my squadron leader called and said, I'm dangling a magnesium flare. Assemble on me. Now, a magnesium flare was very, very bright light. I never saw it. I thought, well, nuts. I'm not going to take a chance on killing my crew for a food drop mission. I'll strike out on my own. So I lowered the nose of the plane and came down very, very fast. And I remember that I crossed a B-24 field, and there were B-24s in the traffic pattern, and I flew in below them. And I was in and out of snow showers all the time. Visibility was just absolutely zero. And luckily, I didn't run into any of the B-24s. I hit the wash, which was the beginning of the North Sea. And just like that, the weather opened up, and it was just bright, beautiful. And there were planes all over the sky. Everybody was heading for Holland, and in any kind of formation that could be made. And I don't know who I assembled on. I know it wasn't on my leader, and I don't think it was even my own group. But we flew very loose formation to Holland and came in very, very low. I think probably, I don't know, 100, maybe 200 feet elevation. I know we had to fly around a church steeple at one point, and we could see the Dutch people below us waving like mad. And when the order came to salvo, we did so. And the food was just dropped all over the place. And of course, Holland has a lot of canals. And I can clearly remember 2 men in a boat. When they saw the food coming down and splashing in the water, you just go right out of the boat down to help to try to retrieve those food parcels. And it was a wonderful feeling because up to that time, we had dropped essentially death and destruction. Fine feeling to know that we had helped people out. And so we returned piecemeal back to our own groups, our own airfields, and made just a routine landing. But the funny part was, I forgot to mention that as we came over the Dutch coast, I looked down and on a German anti-aircraft battery just below us, and I clearly remember seeing a German sentinel with his rifle slung over his shoulder, walking his post at that particular time. And I thought, if they wanted to shoot us down, we would be dead ducks. But I didn't think anything happened. But when I landed back at the base, all of a sudden I couldn't control the aircraft. As I lost speed, slowing down, the aircraft began to veer to the right. And I couldn't hold it any longer. And finally, we ran off the side of the runway and just evacuated the aircraft with no problem. And later on, I talked to the crew chief and said, did you ever find out what happened to our tire? And that's what it was, a flat tire. And yeah, he said, I found a 50 caliber slug in it. So it sounded as though somebody did take a shot at us, which we didn't even know about at the time. But that was a very small price to pay for the mission that we flew.